Hi, welcome to Portage County Matters. I'm Patty Dreier, Portage County Executive, and I'm really excited about today's show. We're not even going to do news at the top because I have an extra special guest. My guest today is Dr. Phil Idsvoog. Phil is the chair of our Portage County Board of Supervisors right here in Portage County, and so you know what? I just want to let everybody know all about county government with your help here today, and I thought we should just get straight to it. So welcome, Phil.
Thank you very much for the introduction.
Yeah. Hey, listen. This is a chance, to ask questions that sometimes we don't always get a chance to ask in the community. We hear you on the radio after the county board meeting, and you're presiding over the county board meetings, and you do such a great job at leading meetings and things like that. But how about the guy that you are in this leadership role in Portage County? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how long you lived here, and let us get to know you more.
Okay, well, I've been here for all practical purposes all my adult life. I graduated from UW River Falls in the spring of '68 with a degree in history and a minor in English, or a major in history and a minor in English, and took a job teaching high school history at P.J. Jacobs when it was a high school. So I did that from '68 to '78, and during that time I also earned a master's degree at River Falls in history, and then I got started getting interested in administration. And from 1978 to 1990, I was the assistant principal at Ben Franklin. I finished up a specialist certificate from UW-Madison in educational administration. And then in 1990, I completed my doctoral degree at UW-Madison, and I became principal at P.J. Jacobs, and I was there from 1990 to 2004.
I knew some of that, but I didn't know that history part way back at the beginning. No wonder at one point when we were talking about the show, you wanted to talk, at the end of the show, we're going to talk a little more about the history of Wisconsin counties, which is going to be kind of fun. I didn't know that about you.
Well, now you know. So. My interest in government really stems from my interest in history and trying to understand why things are the way they are. And the more you take a look at history, the more you take a look at government, things change. I mean, just think in 1954, education in this country was separation but equal. Now, separation doesn't define equality. Schools need to be integrated. Mm-hmm. So we do 180s on lots of things.
And so many people say that it seems that, history repeats itself. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think it repeats itself if we're not smart enough to learn something from it. So I think the challenge is that, we need to learn from the mistakes that we make so we don't do that again in the future. And of course, circumstances and economies and lifestyles and values all change. So you need to be aware of that. You need to be aware of really, I think, the fact that don't think everybody else thinks like you do, because they don't. Mm-hmm. And I think the longer you're involved in your job and the longer I live, the more I understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Now, talk about when you were first elected. You've been on the county board for a number of years, a couple of decades, right? Well,
I'll just mention that prior to getting involved in the county board, I was also a village trustee in Plover from 1974 to '82.
So that got you all prepped for what was about to come.
And then in '82, I ran for the county board, and I've been on the county board since '82. And I was chairperson from 1988 to 1990. And when Clem Hintz passed away in 2003, I've been chair since then.
Mm-hmm. So why did you first run? If you want to think about your Village of Plover experience maybe first, and then what motivated you to run for county board?
Well, later. I'll just back up to the Village of Plover. I built a house out in the southwest corner of Plover, and they were in the process of putting sewer in, and it didn't look like they were going to put sewer in our subdivision, which didn't make any sense to me. So I ran for that purpose and got my neighbors involved in making sure that that occurred. And I knew that county impacts the life of all municipalities, and so I thought that we ought to go find out what that's all about. And it's been one challenge, and I think a great responsibility and a great experience ever since. And every time you think that something new can't come up in county government, it does. Who, for example, would have thought the dam was going to break?
After what, 10
10
years? Anyway, when you look at where, what your path has been to get to where you are today, how would you sum up your accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Well, I think the thing I'm most proud of, or the thing I worked the hardest at, especially as chair of past committees and especially as chair of county board, isn't so much the outcome as making sure that the county board behaves according to policy and making sure that it processes things correctly. In other words, if there are problems that occur, or if there are controversial matters that need to be settled, or decisions that need to be made, I think it's extremely important that those things get to the right committees, that they get aired out where they need to be aired out before they get to the board. And if you process things correctly, generally then the resolutions that come on the board floor for decisions, I think, provide a better chance for people to make a better educated decision.
And I've noticed this about your work. You are, even in just my 2 years as county executive, and working closely with you for that entire time period, I have noticed that you really are striving to look at the systems picture, if you would, about how can we best move through the right gateways, if you would, to arrive at whatever the solution, the answer, the decision is going to be. So, and I appreciate that. I've seen that work really well.
In terms of specifics beyond that, I think, getting an ethics committee established, and I can't remember when we did that, but I think that was an important thing to do. When we got into talking about spending serious money, $50 to $75 million for a justice center, I was a strong advocate, and I know some people didn't agree with it, that go out for referendum. I think it was important that it did, because we got a real strong indicator that people in Portage County didn't want to spend that much money. And I think that was important for everybody to know. And direct legislation created your position, county executive, and as it should. If that's what the people want, that's what they ought to get. So I think there are times when that kind of grassroots involvement and that kind of grassroots vote ought to be taken, and I think it's a wake-up call sometimes for people that are on boards.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's well said. Talk about challenges. You've had a couple along the ways, along the years. So what do you see as some of the greatest challenges of having your leadership role?
Well, I think the challenges are that the demands on county government are always greater. There have been over the last 25, 30 years, certainly more kinds of mandates. And now that we're in a tight economy, the struggle, as you well know, having to put together a budget and putting it before the board, is, I think, in 2012, trying to prioritize what's really important and what we can afford to fund. I think one of the things that we've done that I feel real good about is we've maintained a good many reserves, and we've got probably as much money in reserves as a lot of counties, and there were people that were critical that we had too much money in reserves, but I think we'd rather have money in the bank in 2012 than not have any money. And I think that that's been a good course to follow, and I think we need to continue to be fiscally prudent, and I think that that's what we need to do in the future, and I know you're concerned about that kind of thing. And I think basically the board understands that you can't spend more money than you take in. And I think that'll be, for the remainder of this decade, a real challenge.
Mm-hmm. Let's transition for a minute to roles and responsibilities and help everybody, the viewers, understand a little more about the county board structure, our county government as a whole. So let's start with roles and responsibilities of the county board, and then the county board chair, and how the county board governs itself through the executive committee. I thought that would be kind of neat for folks to know.
Well, okay, why don't we start with how the county board chair gets elected. Okay. Everybody, we've got now 25 districts. We used to have 29, but we're down to 25. We are elected by region, not at large. So once the elections are held and once County Board of Supervisors are elected, we have our first organizational meeting. And at that meeting, then a county board chair is elected from the board. Along with that, 4 other members are elected to an executive operations committee, and then the county board chair, quite frankly, and the county executive need to sit down and come up with some recommendations for the county executive committee for committee appointments. We have lots of committees, as you well know. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 26 to 30 standing committees, and then we have people appointed to a variety of other committees like Business Council or EMS, which is emergency management, things like that.
Hey, Phil, excuse me, but aren't you going to say at this point how much fun that was when we got to sit together for how many hours that was?
I was going to get back to that. If you want to talk about a challenge, one of the most difficult things are putting people on committees that they want to be on, and at the same time providing a balance and making sure you're going to have different points of view articulated during those committee meetings, because that kind of dialogue needs to be encouraged and is important relative to coming to solutions. But once that gets done, and once we get our committees rolling, so to speak, and organized, and they elect a chair and a vice chair, those folks provide the oversight and provide the basis for the kinds of resolutions that are going to go to the county board for action. The county board very clearly in the state of Wisconsin, and certainly in a relationship that we now have with the county executive, plays primarily a legislative function. They operate as a body that will make policy. The county executive, as you well know, is in charge of day-to-day activities and is charged by statute with providing the county board with a budget annually, which they can amend or approve or debate and come to some kind of resolve. I think it's important to note that no one supervisor has any kind of authority over anybody. County board decisions are the result of collective discussion and collective activity, and that reverts back then to committee discussion, and they make recommendations. And so it's not an individual kind of thing. It's and basically in Portage County we've had a strong committee system, so that most often by the time a committee makes a recommendation for a resolution going to the county board, it's got usually a pretty solid consensus behind it. Board sets policy really in 3 ways. Committees do lots of planning. You've been parts of lots of planning. We have the Planning and Zoning Committee, which will come up with timelines in order to get plans under one umbrella from all the townships and the villages and the cities, so that we know what we're doing. We've spent a lot of time in the past year coming up with timetables for an energy plan. We need to get together shortly in order to negotiate a new ambulance contract with the city and Rochelle, which is in the tune of $2 million, but that involves plans. Most of the things that we do start with plans and then result in more specifics. Probably the most important document by far that governs how we behave ourselves is our budget. And the budget basically tells the people of Portage County and the state of Wisconsin how we're going to provide services and what our priorities are. As you well know, counties were created for the most part to be an arm of the state, and we have specific functions that we have to provide for. And if you take a look, for example, at, and I'll just read you off the list, the following offices, for example, are mandated by state constitution and constitute state constitutional officers: the clerk, the treasurer, the sheriff, the coroner, the clerk of circuit courts, the register of deeds, the surveyor, and the district attorney. The state mandates that we can't control those offices. We don't have any authority to tell those people what to do, but we have to provide a budget that allows them to do the job that they have been directed to do by the state of Wisconsin.
and supervise on a daily basis, you know, making sure that the staff, who are county employees of all of those units that you mentioned, you know, are pulled into the fold, and they're all part of our general operation.
Well, probably the most independent office in the county would be that of sheriff, because it really gets its mandates from the state of Wisconsin. It's part of the county budget. The budget still has to provide the dollars for the sheriff to do his job, but next to the governor, the sheriff is the second highest constitutional office in the state of Wisconsin, and nobody can tell the sheriff how to run his department. He's accountable to the people. We're accountable to the people in terms of making sure that he has the money to do his job, and that's where that comes out of the mix.
Mm-hmm. It makes for a lot of interesting days for all of us as we're all working together. I mean, as you know, you list the diversity of positions right there alone. When we take a look at county government, for the folks who are listening, whether they're watching this on cable television or they're watching this on the county's website, let's just talk a little bit about county board meetings and the fact that they're open to everybody when they're held, and that folks can also register to speak and make sure that their own voices are heard.
Okay, the county board meets the third Tuesday of every month. It meets at 5 o'clock in the county courthouse, and anybody that wants to speak to an agenda item can register at the time of the meeting to do that. If you want to have 3 minutes to speak your piece about a non-agenda item, you can register by noon the Tuesday prior to the Tuesday county board meeting, which is 1 week, and county board chair, at this time being myself, will sign off on that, and you can have 3 minutes to say whatever you want to. I just wanted to add that, getting back into the meat of the county board meetings, the third way we set policy in the county is with resolutions. Nothing comes to the county board floor for action without it coming through a committee with a resolution for actions. County board passes both resolutions and ordinances. What's the difference? An ordinance is more like a law. It's fixed. It's kind of there permanently unless modified, and it generally has a rule of enforcement. This may seem like a contradiction, but we bring everything to the county board floor in the form of a resolution. We even bring ordinances to the county board floor as a resolution. Resolutions in and by themselves are more or less temporary, and they may ask for specific requests for things to be done. A good example of a resolution would be the passing of an annual budget. Budget, is, of course, is a plan. We don't have to stick to it 110%, so to speak, but it's also something that's done in a year. And we have a code of ordinances which govern our county all the way from planning and zoning to our HR policies.
Mm-hmm. And so when folks come to observe a county board meeting or to observe it on television or whatever the case is, it's through that resolution format that the work of the county gets done.
Exactly.
Really, yeah. All right, so Phil, the other thing about the county board chair position I just want to touch on before we transition to redistricting and some of the other work that we've got forecasted for this year in our roles. You're in this top position, this top leadership position, and we also have a vice chair, Lonnie Krogwald, out of the Amherst area. And then it's a paid position in a limited way anyway. I know that you put in a ton of hours. Maybe you can tell everybody about that, because I don't know that many people really realize all of those things. It should be.
Well, I'm in the courthouse on a daily basis, and I'm doing at least a half a day there in terms of talking to people and feeling and taking questions and concerns. And you know, part of my job is if there's a rub between whether something ought to be dealt with at this committee or that committee, I need to be out there in a proactive kind of manner, making sure people know what's going on and making sure that if something needs to be on somebody's agenda, I kind of get out in front of that and take care of that. I need to field concerns by the public. If there are concerns that need to be on your desk, I think you and I have done a pretty good job of communicating those things back and forth, so we don't get in either one of our ballpark, so to speak, but try to cooperatively and proactively promote the best interest of the county any way that we can.
And you actually have an office then, so again, folks
No, I have an
in the
office.
courthouse,
I'm
clerk's
located
office?
in the county clerk's office. My office is right next to the county clerk. And like I said, I'm there on a daily basis. My name's in the phone book. You can call me anytime, day or night.
And I know you've always been accessible. That is one thing I know about you.
And I spend a fair amount of time on the telephone, which my wife is getting tired of. But
But you got another couple years at least, Bill.
But at least I have a phone I have to walk around with so I can go in the other room so I don't disturb her television or her reading.
So when I called you yesterday, you were watering the garden. I said, yeah. I said, you can go take care of my garden too, but mine, I still had water.
Actually, I don't have a garden. I buy my vegetables on the square. I was just watering the lawn.
Anyway, well, anyway, before I even leave this subject, I just want to thank you. You are accessible. I've never, ever had a hard time connecting, getting to you when there was an important issue to work through, and I appreciate that. You put in a lot of time in a ton of meetings on behalf of the people of this county, and it shows really, and I appreciate that, and I say that on behalf of all the people that I represent here. So
yeah, I thank you for that, and I know the kind of time you put in, and it's not as easy as it looks.
Yeah, and that's where my eyes just got cross-eyed for a second here. But anyway, okay, let's talk about redistricting. You took the lead. That was a big step. You know, when the census comes up, every 10 years you get the opportunity to redistrict. Our county board membership used to be 29 representatives, and now we're at 25. And so each of those county board supervisors represents a district of roughly 2,800 citizens. And in our county of over 70,000 people, I mean, that's a sizable constituency and voice to represent. Anyway, are you noticing any effects? I know it's only been, we've a couple months into the new redistricting plan, but have you noticed any effects of what it's done when we've downsized the county board? I've noticed a couple of effects myself.
Well, I think that even just downsizing four, and I'd like to go back into a little bit of history on that, but to answer that directly, I think that more people have more assignments and are going to have to get more directly involved before. And so I think that the fewer number or the lower number, even by 4 people, makes that 25 maybe a bit more focused than 29 was sometimes, because I think it was a bit easier to maybe say, well, they're going to take care of that. And somebody else is going to take care of that. I think there's just a little greater interest on the part of all 25 looking at things. Now, the reason that this matter, I think, came up, and I'll go back to 2005, in which there was a Senate Bill 4 that was proposed that would allow counties by referendum initiative, and you went back to the last county board election, and you needed signatures of 25% of that number in order to have a referendum that would allow you to downsize your board. Governor Doyle signed that Act 100, I think it's called Act 100 right now, into law in 2005. That generated a lot of discussion around the state. Let's cut the board in half, let's go down to 3, let's go down to 5. I was really opposed to cutting the board in half. I think that would be a mistake. I think people that proposed that, for example, in Wood County, where they got their board cut in half, I don't think they're particularly happy with it. We, as you well know, have to redistrict every 10 years based on what changes in the census. So if you're going to downsize your board or do something different with it, rather than go through that exercise twice, it makes more sense to do it at that point in time. I was in favor of a figure 25 for a couple of reasons. We had during that past decade a number of years where we didn't have enough people to run for every district. It made no sense to me to have blank districts. I thought the best way to ensure that is let's reduce the size of the board. I didn't want to get much lower than 25 for a couple of reasons. One, I think county board participation needs to be viable as a part-time job so anybody working full-time can go after it. You make the board too small, and the only people that are going to be interested in it, quite frankly, are people that have time to do it, and most of the time that's retired people.
And Phil, the other thing is when we were doing the assignments for all these different committees, we were having trouble making sure you didn't have a quorum for another committee on this committee, so that you'd have to publish it for both committees at once anytime you ended up with a quorum representation. The thing I've noticed is that even at a meeting last night, there seems to be a greater difficulty, even with 25 members, to make sure that you can find a meeting time that isn't in conflict with another meeting time. I've noticed it's already a more challenging situation for us. But the thing that I think is a really good benefit is, yes, there's more engagement by the county board members. You can see that because they're more informed across numbers of committees than they had been when we were spread much more thinly. So I think that then does make for more informed decision making. And it's a real value to the people, I think.
A third point I want to make, which I think is very important, I didn't think that we ought to get much smaller than 25, because in a county that's as rural as we are, the smaller you get, the more influence the urban area is going to have and the less influence the rural area is going to have. Right. At 25, we've still got significant representation from the rural areas, and I think that's important, especially in an agro-based economy like we have in Portage County. Yep. In terms of overlap with the city districts, that worked out pretty well. And that was the recommendation I made to the Executive Operations Committee, and they supported it, and we didn't have unanimous support on the county board floor. Some people wanted to keep it as is, but I think it was a move in the right direction, and as far as I'm concerned, I was an advocate for it, and I think it was a good thing. And
as they say, Phil, the rest is history on that, you know.
So yeah. I understand that a citizen could still petition even after we've done this and reduce it again if they wanted to, or increase it, but you can only do that, you can only hold that referendum one time during a decade. I think our county board has been very responsible in terms of addressing that question and coming up with some good rationale for why we came up with the number 25.
Now, I know that we only have a couple of minutes left in the show, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip to the bottom of the number of questions that we kind of set up for ourselves that we would talk about today. And one of the things that I want to ask you about is, if someone was interested in running for county board, for a county board position in their future, do you have any advice for them?
I think that, yeah, I have some advice. Make sure you want to put in the time. You're going to be on at least 3 committees. They're going to meet monthly or twice a month. The county board is going to meet once a month. You need to be committed to do that. You need to do some homework, I think. Pick up a county board handbook or the book that has all of the committees that we have. Look that over, see what you may be interested in. Anybody that would be interested in talking to me about it, I'd be glad to have a conversation with you. Have a conversation with Patty Dreier, our county executive. Take a look at what you're going to have to be focused on, and take a look at the kinds of services that we are obligated to provide, and whether or not you want to be part of that discussion, and whether or not you want to get involved in seeing how we can make that work better than we currently are.
Well, we get to wrap up here right now with the show, but I think that is really, really good advice. And I think that there are tons of opportunities for folks to get involved as citizens, even without running for office, in guiding the future of Portage County. I appreciate your leadership, Phil, and all that I get to do and working with you. I really do think that we work well together, and I so appreciate you being here today. I want to tell everybody else that next month, Sarah Brish is going to be my guest from the Stevens Point Area Convention and Visitors Bureau, and we're going to talk a lot about tourism and how we're attracting economic activity here in Portage County through her hard work and her team's hard work. Again, Phil, thank you very, very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, and I think everybody appreciates your high energy level. Keep that up, and I'll give you a ride on my motorcycle this summer.
Oh, Lord. Anyway, thank you.